Welcome to the University of Nottingham Department of Theology and Religious Studies series on sacred calendars. Today I have with me Mr. Shujahat Aslam. He's a local lay Imam and occasional preacher at the University of Nottingham Mosque. Welcome, Shujahat.
Thank you.
We'd like you today to share with us on the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit the origins of this ritual.
Sure. So Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's compulsory upon every Muslim above the age of puberty who can afford to do it. I think that's quite important because the average cost of Hajj is about £4,000 now at least for one person. So if you don't have that amount of money, you don't have to do it. But conversely, if you do have it, you have to do it. And were you to die not having performed Hajj, you would be sinful. Okay? The origins of Hajj go right back about 4,000 years to the time of Prophet Abraham alayhi salam. So as Muslims, we believe in Prophet Abraham, Prophet Adam, Moses, etc. And Prophet Abraham was instructed to leave his wife Hajar and son Ismail, who was also a prophet, in the desert lands of Mecca. At that time, Mecca was totally uninhabited. And his wife Hajar, she ran between 2 mountains, Safa and Marwa. And that's where we get the ritual of people having to walk between these 2 mountains now as part of the Hajj and the Umrah.
How far apart are these mountains?
Not very far, maybe a few hundred yards, for example, and not very far at all. And you don't actually have to climb a physical mountain, it's just like the slope, as it were. Okay. Also, his son Ismail, who's a baby, stamped on the ground and Zamzam water came out, which is a very blessed type of water which Muslims are also instructed to drink as part of the Umrah. Okay. Then Ibrahim, he's left them at this point, and then his wife Hajar and son Ismail, they settle here in this place of Mecca, and another tribe comes and people start to flourish in that area. Ibrahim alayhi salam, peace be upon him, comes back to that area, and he's instructed by God for him and his son to build the Kaaba. So this is the origins of the Kaaba, which Muslims actually have to visit as part of the Hajj. This is where it's being built about 4,000 years ago. So they build it brick by brick, and they're asking Allah or God to bless that place whilst they're performing the rituals of going around and building the Kaaba. Okay, so that's the origins of the Kaaba as we understand it. And another key thing that happens at that point is that Prophet Abraham is instructed to slaughter his son. This is a test for him now from God to show his obedience to God in whatever he commands. So Ibrahim, peace be upon him, is ready to do this, and his son as well instructs his father, go ahead. So this shows the obedience of both father and son. God is very pleased with this and removes his son Ismail and is replaced by an animal, and Ibrahim sacrifices that animal. So Muslims going forward from there as part of the Hajj have to sacrifice an animal and distribute the food to the poor. So these are some of the rituals of Hajj. So Hajj starts at this time 4,000 years ago. Okay. Now, after that time, what happens is that paganism starts to get introduced into Mecca. Okay. Many idols are actually around the Kaaba and actually inside the Kaaba as well. So when we go hundreds of years after this point, the whole of the Kaaba has changed, and Hajj as we know it today is no longer existent. Okay. This occurs over a number of centuries until we reach the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He then comes, and one of the first things that he does when he reconquers Mecca is to purify the Kaaba. So he removes all of these idols, he calls back to the oneness of God, and the institution of Hajj is revitalized, and Muslims, as the Hajj as we know it today, starts to take place again from the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So this is the history of the Hajj.
So what you're saying is the Prophet Muhammad reinstituted the original, the proper form of the pilgrimage, the Hajj.
Exactly. Before this time, it had been totally polluted. People were going around the Kaaba and sometimes naked. They were sacrificing animals, smearing blood over the walls of the Kaaba. So it had been totally changed from what Prophet Ibrahim had called to. And then the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, restarted that, as it were. And as we do today, the Hajj is as we see it today.
So can you say a little bit about, you've talked about going around the Kaaba, which Muslims practice today. There's also additional rituals after that, I believe.
Sure. There's a number of things that have to happen over a series of days. Okay? So when one is about to do the pilgrimage, the first thing they have to do is before they even enter into Kaaba or Mecca, they have to go to a place called the Miqat. Okay? From this point, their pilgrimage starts, and they have to remove all their clothing and put on 2 simple white sheets for the man, and for the woman, it's their normal clothing, but it shouldn't be anything that's attractive or alluring. Okay. Now, particularly for the man, if you think about it, it's symbolizing that you're totally leaving your normal life. So you just got 2 white sheets wrapped around you. Even your clothing is your shoes are quite specific, open sandals. So it's really a very, very simple kind of attire, and you can't tell between king or peasant in that situation. Everyone is dressed in exactly the same way. So your Hajj starts on the 8th day of the month of Hajj or Dhul Hijjah. Okay? On this day, the pilgrims all have to go to a place called Mina. And if you imagine there's maybe about 2 million, more than that, for example, people going, everyone's doing the same journey, arriving at Mina, and you spend the day in Mina, which normally there's tents there, and you're worshipping God, reading Quran, and supplicating to God. Okay? The next day, on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, you have to go to the plains of Arafat, which is what you mentioned. Okay? This is really the Hajj, the most significant day of Hajj, and you have to make dua or supplicate to God for whatever you want in this place. So you spend the day there, everyone together, raising their hands, dressed in these simple clothes, millions of people asking God for whatever they want in life. Moving on from there, in the evening you go to a place called Muzdalifah, okay, a valley nearby, and you spend the night in Muzdalifah and you collect some stones there. Okay? On the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, you return back to Mina and you stone the Jamarat, which are like kind of long pillars, as it were, which signify the devil. And again, this was a ritual which the Prophet Abraham 4,000 years ago started off. So the Muslim will do that, the pilgrim will do that on the 10th day of Dhul Hijjah. Once he's done that, he will carry out the sacrifice, which again we've mentioned and covered before, signifying the sacrifice that Abraham was instructed to do. And the Muslim man will shave off all of his head, all of his hair, and the female will cut a little lock of her hair off. Okay? Then all the pilgrims will go back into Mecca, and they'll do tawaf around the Kaaba again, which is exactly what Prophet Abraham did, and they'll walk between Safa and Marwa, again from what the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam did. All of this will happen on the 10th day of Dhul Hijjah. The pilgrims then will all go back to Mina, and they'll spend 3 days in Mina, stoning the Jamarat, the pillars each day, and finally they'll conclude their Hajj by going back to Mecca and doing one more tawaf, and that concludes the Hajj for the pilgrim.
You mentioned this is an obligation for those who are able, and it is quite expensive, so not everyone's able. Sure. But those who are able to fulfill the obligation, are there benefits beyond simply fulfilling the obligation? Are there things that the Muslim pilgrim hopes for, expects?
Yeah, very much so. It's a compulsory act, so they have to do it. But like you say, there's a great deal of reward as well. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, the reward for an accepted Hajj is paradise. Okay? But the Hajj has to be accepted. So there's certain conditions of doing the Hajj. So you can't push, you can't fight, you can't shove, you can't hunt, you can't have marital relationships. So there's a large number of restrictions. And if you imagine, whilst doing the Hajj, like I mentioned, there's millions of people, you're all on the same bus, you're walking along, inevitably people are going to tread on you, you know, all those kind of things. But you have to remain calm and you have to remain patient at all times. So there's great reward or spiritual reward from God for doing the Hajj. There's also the personal impact. When you see the Kaaba, it's truly amazing. You know, it's like the black cube-like structure. People may have seen it on pictures, etc. But actually to be there and to see millions of people dressed in white, all going around there, literally 24 hours a day, it's an amazing sight. It truly is amazing. You're seeing people all supplicating, raising their hands in Arafat, asking God for whatever they want. So it's a very moving experience. There's people from every country of the world all united in this act of worship. You're reenacting history again, what Prophet Abraham did, what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did. So it's a very deeply spiritual journey.
Can you say something briefly about the way in which Muslims here in the UK allocate who gets to go? I can't imagine that everybody can go each year that they want to. How's that work?
Yeah, the Saudi government tends to have a quota system where the number of people are limited per country. In the UK, it's fairly lenient. I don't know if anybody's actually wanted to go and prevented from going, but where you've got countries with a significant Muslim populations, large countries in the Middle East, for example, in the Indian subcontinent, Indonesia, if all of those people, or significant numbers, obviously want to go each year, some of them are prevented, and then they have to do the turn next year. But it comes on to an important point, because often we do find people trying to do Hajj more than once. It's permissible to do that, and they'll get the reward, but perhaps sometimes it would be better for them to give up their turn for somebody else who hasn't had the opportunity to do Hajj. And the Prophet encourages to do Hajj whilst we're young and strong, because it involves quite a large amount of rigor and effort in terms of all this walking, spending nights away from home, etc. So it is a challenge as well as a very rewarding experience.
Shujahat, thank you so much for helping us understand Hajj, and we wish you well.
My pleasure. Thank you.